JuiceShop is supposed to be vulnerable, that's the point. But the real skill is not finding a bug, it's learning how to read the application when it gives you something weird, like a blocked file, a strange response, a clue that looks useless. But here's the twist, sometimes the app doesn't just block you, sometimes it accidentally teaches you how to bypass it. So in this video we are going to take one small detail, turn it into a working idea and use that idea to keep moving through the challenge instead of guessing randomly. So let's get to it. So I went back to the FTP directory and started looking through the files again. So this directory had multiple files, as you know if you saw my last video about JuiceShop, and one of the first files that caught my attention was package.jason.bak. Before opening it, let's understand why this file is interesting. So the .bak extension usually means backup, and in web applications backup files are always worth checking because they can contain information that was not supposed to be public anymore. So sometimes they contain old source code, sometimes dependencies, configuration details, and sometimes they simply help us understand how the application is built. So I clicked on the file, but instead of getting the file, JuiceShop returned 403, which means forbidden. So at first that looks like the server is blocking us completely, but the important part is not only that we were blocked, the important part is why we were blocked. And the response told me that only files ending in .md and .pdf were allowed. And that tells us something very important. The application is probably checking the file extension before deciding if we can access the file. So the logic is probably something like this. If the file ends in .md or .pdf, allow it. If it ends in anything else, block it. That means the protection may not be based on real authorization. It may be based on the file name. And when a filter depends only on the file name, the next question is, can we make the file name look allowed to the filter while still accessing the original name? That's where the bypass comes in. The file I wanted was this one, but that ends in .bak, so it gets blocked. The filter allows .md, so I needed the request to appear like it ended in .md. So I changed the request from this to this, and this worked, guys. The server returned 200, which is okay, and I was able to read the contents of the file. Now let me explain why the %2500 works. Well, this is a double encoded null byte. In URL encoding, the %25 represents the %sign. So when %2500 is decoded once, it becomes $00, and this represents a null byte. Now, a null byte is a special character that means end of string in some systems in programming languages. So the trick is that the server-side validation sees the request as if it ends with .md, which passes the extension check. But later, when the path is processed, the null bytes can cause the file path to be treated as if it ends earlier. So this request can pass the filter because it appears to end in .md, but the backend may still open the original file. After that first success, I wanted to see if the same bypass worked on the other backup files. So next, I tested the coupons file. So this file is also interesting because it ends in .bak, and even though the name contains .md in the middle, the full file name ends in .bak, and that's why it is blocked. So I used the same idea. I requested the file, then I used the null byte, and again it worked. However, I didn't see anything interesting for now here, so I moved on to the next backup file. That file was the package-lock.jason.bak. So I requested the file, then I added the null byte, and once again JuiceShop returned the file. So at this point the pattern was clear. Any file that was blocked because of its extension could potentially be accessed by adding this to the end of the file name. Now, with that part done, I went back to another file from the FTP directory, which was the incident support file. This is a KeePass database, and a KeePass database is basically an encrypted password vault. It can contain usernames, passwords, URLs, notes, and other sensitive information. But to open it, we need the master password. Now, in the previous episode, I had already extracted the hash from the file and tried to crack it, but I did not get the password. So this time, instead of using a completely generic word list, I wanted to make the attack more targeted. So, instead of trying millions of unrelated passwords, I used words that match the context. In this case, I had a few useful clues. So the file, for example, was called incident support. So the words incident and support were important. I had also found emails from JuiceShop users, and I used those in these word lists. And JuiceShop gave password advice, saying that a good password should include lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, special characters, and at least 8 characters. So I used all that information to create a costume word list with the help of ChatGPT. Then I ran John the Ripper with that word list, and this time the password was cracked. So to display it, I ran this command, and the password was support 2022 ! So now I had the KeePass master password, and the next thing I did was open the database using a tool called KeePass.xc. So I opened the file, then wrote the passwords, and the database opened. Inside, I found a set of credentials. This was the username, and this was the password. At this point, the next step was obvious. If the KeePass database contains credentials, we should try them on the JuiceShop login page. So I went back to JuiceShop, opened the login page, and entered the username and the password. And I was able to log in as a support user, guys. Now, there was still another file in FTP that I wanted to understand, and that file was encrypt.pyc. Before we move on, let me just explain what .pyc is. So, a .pyc file is a compiled Python file. When Python runs a script, it can compile the .py file into bytecode, so it can run faster later. So we do not get the original readable Python file directly, but in many cases we can decompile the .pyc file and recover something close to the original source code. So the first step was download the file, but because the file doesn't end with MD or PDF, it will be blocked by the same FTP filter. So I used the same bypass again. I used the Null byte. Then I changed the name of the file to encrypt.pyc, and then I decompiled it with a tool called uncompile6, and this was the command. So this command takes the compiled Python file and writes the recovered source code into a new file called encrypt.py. Then I opened the recovered file with cat, and when I read the code, I saw that it was encrypting another file called announcement.md. And the important detail was how our Python file was encrypting the announcement file. It was encrypting one character at a time. And that matters because if encryption is done character by character, then each character always produces a predictable encrypted value. So instead of needing to break the entire encryption system, I could reverse it. So first, I downloaded the encrypted announcement file, then I created a small Python program to decrypt it, and after running the script, the decrypted output gave me this URL. So now I had a hidden route, and I went back to JuiceShop, then added the path to the URL, and another challenge was solved. Now, after that, I continued exploring the website and found a page called Complaints. This page had a file upload form, And file upload forms are always interesting because they are one of those features where the front-end and back-end need to agree very clearly. So the browser might say one thing, the server might enforce something else, and if those two do not match, that mismatch can become a vulnerability. So before uploading anything, I wanted to understand what the application expected. So I opened DevTools. Then I used the element selector and clicked on the file upload field. In the HTML, I saw this, and this means that the front-end is configured to accept only .pdf and .zip. But there was another detail. The accessibility label mentioned XML B2B order file. That's interesting because the visible file restriction says PDF and zip, but the label still mentions XML. So, what does that mean? It probably means that XML upload support used to exist, but it's now deprecated. In other words, XML was likely part of an older interface. So, the front-end no longer includes .xml in the accepted file types, but some old text still references it. And the big question is, was XML support removed only from the front-end, or was it also removed from the back-end? Because if it was only removed from the front-end, the back-end might still process XML files. So I tested it. I created a simple XML file, wrote a message, selected the XML file and submitted it. And even though the current file picker only allowed PDF and zip, the backend still processed the XML file. And with this, we solved two challenges. The first one was related to uploading a file type that should not be accepted, and the second one was related to discovering and using a deprecated interface. And that's it, guys. I hope this video helped you in any way, and if it did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, see you next time, stay curious and stay safe. Bye bye!